Hey everybody, it's Fernando Labastida again, once again here with Linh Nguyen. He's the CEO and co-founder of IT-Conductor here in these founder interviews where we're taking a fascinating dive into the founding of IT-Conductor and what are the problems that Lynn and David, the co-founder, Savitsky, is seeing out there in terms of the problems that are being experienced in the IT department. So I was wondering if you could explain to me what is SOAP and what is the significance of this whole SOAP category in the IT world?
Yes. So SOAP is relatively new and is defined by Gartner to be a more flowing solution that goes from not only detection of issues, but orchestrating and automating the solution for them, right? So it's not just detecting problems, but it's remediating, it's creating an end-to-end service that allows you to find root causes of problems and dealing with the automation, which we tend to relate them separately in solution, especially in the market today where you have a lot of vendors that are doing specific things. But when you look at companies, they're not looking by technology, right? They're buying solutions. And when you're looking at solution, it's really very like black and white. It's like, yes, I have this problem, but I also it related to this, and then sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And so it becomes a very complex statement, a problem statement. We would like to be crisp is somewhat be modeled by the complexity of IT in general with computing and the fast moving pace of the industry that the software and now hardware where you're saying that with cloud there's a lot of what we call the platform as a service where it's software defined, right? Software defines everything, hardware, networking, etc. So when there is a problem, it's rarely black and white. It requires a level of diagnosis and then a level of automation that is not just a single action. And so therefore, when you have automation of a single action, it's easy. You just, you have smart devices like speakers, you tell it to do something, tell you the weather, it's done. But when you do need a more complex solution to automate a bunch of tasks, they are so what called orchestration, right? So enterprise now requires more of an orchestration rather than just a single automation. And therefore, SOAP is what Gartner term a service orchestration and automation platform that takes together maybe 3 or 4 traditional tools, combine them together to deliver a solution that solves a problem that is somewhat complex, that requires instrumentation, it requires a level of intelligence to determine the root cause. It also requires a level of sophistication so that you can orchestrate a solution that is multi-step, it has logic, and it can be run on demand, or it can be event driven, or it can be scheduled. And then it doesn't live by itself. It also integrates because that's part of an enterprise solution. An enterprise solution doesn't just say, hey, I remove everything and I have no friction dealing with the interoperability. So the integration is very important. That, for instance, if you're integrating with service desk, you're integrating with analytics, you're integrating with certain mechanism to deliver service to the end users. What I mean is end users, they could come in many shape or form. You
Yeah.
could be a factory worker dealing with a scanning device. You could be a sophisticated analyst dealing with an analytical dashboarding, and you could be a automation engineer dealing with workflow charting and automation type drag drop. All of these use cases typically would require somewhat a bunch of different tools, some presentations, some back-end automation, and some kind of integration into the IT service management tools out there. So imagine if you create a ticket automatically when you detect a problem, that ticket then matches against certain orchestration that you have in your catalog. And that catalog then can be launched either by a automation engineer, or it could be automatically launched with those parameters and run against that and say, hey, for instance, if I need to run a payroll, on demand, not a scheduled one, and I have these employees I need to pay, it goes over here, it pulls the data from perhaps time management, and then it basically creates this payroll file, sends to the server that it then sent to a third party outside the organization, like, a Workday or an SAP or whatever, that processes that, and then in return comes back with some acknowledgement that this is done, completed, confirmed. So that's an example of an automation that touches
Right.
multiple things, but it
Right.
needs to be orchestrated. It doesn't happen by itself. And therefore, when we talk about service orchestration, it's really delivering a service and not rather just a widget.
Right. 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 So it's really an integrated approach. It's sort of like it takes into consideration the context of the whole department, of
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
whole IT
mm-hmm,
ecosystem,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to working in isolation as a point solution.
Exactly. So it's full stack, it's end to end, it touches many user types, it does many different platforms, and it basically adapts to the evolving need of what we call workflow. Workflow can change because I might change a part out and I need that workflow still, it's still relevant, but maybe the component in there that is talking to is no longer. If I move from an SAP to, an Oracle, NetSuite, whatever it is, and I need that activity in that workflow to work differently. Or if I move my payroll processing from an SAP into a Workday, that activity talks to a different component now. But the workflow is still valid because it does that function. So how do you orchestrate that flexibly and stay relevant without kind of like uprooting and redoing everything, right? You can say, I have a workflow, it's just a diagram full of activities and interrelationships, and I can replace an activity if I want to and orchestrate that differently for different applications. So that makes it relevant long term, not just a one time. Typically, there's automation out there where it just creates something and it does what it does, and then something changes. You're like, okay, I'm pretty much have to reinvent and do the whole thing again. But what we see as a vision is that you create workflows and it just stays alive and you can adapt to whatever the need is that comes up, as it always does in an agile format.
Hmm.
And it's lightweight, right?
Yeah.
So you shouldn't have to create 3 tools and then integrate them and customize them. You should be able to just adapt it and integrate. So the interoperability is very important. Obviously, today's world is full of APIs. Everybody enterprise-wide can talk to each other. How do you do that in a meaningful way that saves customer time and money, and do it in a way where it has compliance, it has accountability. Like if something is broke, something's not running, you have ability to alert somebody to take care of the problem, or maybe you have compliance requirement in the industry where you not only do the action, but you can provide audit reports to allow some kind of auditing to make sure that, hey, these critical things are taken care of. I am in compliance. Check, done. So it is applied very wide across industry for many things. Could be, take an example of maybe cybersecurity, maybe patching, maybe staying up to date with updates and systems that need to be in compliance of some security. Well, first you need to have a check, automate it. Then you need to remediate issues, and then you have to report that issues have been remediated. And though you close that loop, that could be done as a SOAP solution, right? As a detection, it's a remediation, it's a compliance, a reporting, and then you constantly monitor that hey, I've applied this compliance remediation, and now I'm monitoring it for any deviation. If there's a
Hmm.
deviation, again, I notify whoever is responsible that hey, that thing there that we fixed is somebody went in and flipped it again, and now we're not. And so it needs to be somewhat real time platform that can deal with all these changes and not a one time thing. That's why we think the word service is not it's not a static thing. You provide a service, that service continues to work regardless of who's in charge and when it was put in place. It stays and active, and then it completely manages that cycle of life cycle management,
Hmm.
which is very important because I think everybody who assumes something is static is
Yeah.
going to be wrong the next day.
Yeah. 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 So it's active. It's real. It's working in real time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask you about, and I know that Gartner and some of the other analyst firms follow the space, the service orchestration and automation
Mm-hmm.
platform
Mm-hmm.
space.
Mm-hmm.
But how? And how deeply penetrated are SOAP solutions, whether it's IT-Conductor or competitors, in the enterprise IT department yet? Is it in 10% of IT departments? Is it 20, 30%, or is it less?
I see much less. I see there's a lot of market that is somewhat disconnected. They are buying still old-fashioned. It's like when we switched from on-prem software to SaaS.
Yeah.
There's a slow uptake. There's a very perpetual license base
Mm-hmm.
because it's not only the customer, it's the whole supply chain. If you have a value-added reseller and they all they do is sell software licenses, they want to continue selling software licenses. If you now have a newcomer that provides a SaaS platform that has this ability to just say, hey, subscription, you don't need the value-added reseller anymore. But those guys will continue to resist and they'll sell old-fashioned perpetual licenses. The same thing, I think, going from on-prem software to SaaS, it's going from software solutions to service-based solutions, right? And it's still that uptake that is slow because customers typically are very reactive. They buy what they need when they need it, and they're not thinking strategically long term. If you're buying a platform, you're thinking, what problem does this solve? Again, I'm not buying technology. I'm buying a solution. So if a solution, I have to think differently. I'm not just buying for the sake of I have some tool for some guys to use and it doesn't solve a long-term strategic thing, then it's still a tool. It's not a platform. A tool is a tool. It solves a specific problem. So getting their mindset wrapped around tool versus a solution
Mm-hmm.
takes time and takes education because most time I say soap, nobody, everybody think maybe soap XML, which is
Yeah. It's a different thing.
protocol. It's a different thing. So we have to say, well, here's what service orchestration automation platform. So part of our charter is to educate as well. And it's not meaning that we talk down to them and we're just saying, hey, this is the paradigm different. Just like AI is introducing abilities for us to have a different user experience. We don't go and search and research the way we did. We just talk to it and, you ask it question, it gives you back answers and more quicker interaction. So the GUI has to change. The user experience has to change, right? Same thing with SOAP. It's like, you have to talk to them in terms of what is the solution you're looking for to solve these problems long term. So I think the industry is probably, from my experience in the field, because I go out to customers dealing with specific problems, when I position a solution, it has to solve multiple things. It has to be relevant. It has to be adaptive. And at the same time, it has to be quick. If it takes 3 years to, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
In fact, even 6 months doesn't even work. Today's world is like, I want it yesterday. I want to solve a problem. Can you do something adaptive, quick, and deliver me this solution? And I have like 10 more for you to do. But if you can give me this one and then tell me that all these other 10 can be solved using the same approach, then you have a valid kind of proposal, right? Because people want to see something quick, get a quick ROI. At the same time, they can use that platform for many other use cases. So this is where I think the major difference is you're not buying a tool, you're buying a platform solution to solve a bunch of problems without having to acquire additional tools, train more people, maintain that thing. Because the more time you spend training or investing in people instead of the solution, you are now locked to more human process as opposed to an automation process. Because I used to say, if you have enough time, money, you probably get enough people, train them to do the same thing, but manually.
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole thing about SOAP is it's supposed to automate this so you don't have to just throw bodies at something.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, great. So what are some of the triggering events? So if you're, if how, so last time we talked, you talked about, your car, a hypothetical scenario, your car is, is doing a click. The next day is making a different noise until eventually it's going to break down and you're going to have to call the tow truck and it's going to have to come and bring it in, right? If you had only just brought it in the first time you heard the click, 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 you would have avoided that, right? So, and I think the same thing is the case in IT departments where they have things that are going wrong and they know like there's some, maybe maybe a bunch of servers are slow or whatever. What are some of those? And then they have some kind of maybe like a catastrophic thing, So like in the case of maybe the motor ran out of oil and it froze up and they had to replace, very expensive replacing of the motor. So what are some of those trigger incidences that triggers somebody saying, okay, I give up. I'm going to have to really get serious about, service orchestration and automation platforms?
Yeah, I would say one of the triggers is always financially related, right? So we tend to respond more, at least business tend to respond more to a financial incident. And it works both ways. The customer can have a financial incident. The service provider can also have a financial incident. What I mean by that is that if most companies who engage with a system integrator or managed service provider of some sort, they have certain agreements in place to provide service or manage services to a certain expectation. So if anything failed, there is a kind of a financial impact, right? So, for example, if you run a store chain of, across the U.S. and you have hundreds of stores and they're putting in orders and, the system's down and orders can't be put in and then you got a backlog and they're not getting delivery and customers get upset. They go some other store, right?
Yeah.
That's a financial thing, right?
Yes.
And why is that irrelevant? Well, then the customer will say, hey, this system is not giving me what I expect in terms of performance to deliver to my service level expectation. And that could mean two things. It could be that there's something wrong with the system, or it could be something wrong with the people process that are delivering the service. So if it's so complex and you don't understand where the bottleneck is, and the service provider or the managed service can't determine or solve the problem quickly, then you get this bottleneck. So what I find when I'm at customers and talking about this kind of issue is that there is certainly a user impact, and the user impact is almost always money, financial. If they have to, let's say, take an order by paper and then later on enter, well, somebody has to work overtime to make sure those stuff goes. All the staff has to make sure all these orders are get processed, right? Because there are things like logistics, trucks, things waiting to get shipped, and warehouses need to get cleared, and everything start bottleneck. So from that perspective, they have a problem, and then you're talking now more process engineering. So
Yeah.
part of this is that you can't just say, okay, well, that's an incident, I'll just solve that by doing this, and then it's going to happen again similarly, not exactly the same, and then that happens, I create a ticket, I'll do this. If you're a process consultant, you go in there and you say, well, it looks like this process has some deficiency, some defects. So either fix the process first, identify where the breakdown is, and then once you have a better or a fixed process, you can go ahead and say, okay, can this be automated? How should we automate this so that this process is now going to be efficiently executed by machine and not waiting on response from people, and I have quicker turnaround time? And so an example might be, I detect the order processing is backlog, it's down or something. I notify the right groups. They say, oh, yeah, taking orders from a bunch of point of sale stores is a problem, or buyer portals are breaking down, etc., etc. You dispatch somebody, let's say, within 15 minutes because you notify that there is a business process being broken. There's some alarms going off. You don't see the volume of transactions coming in. That's also a sign, right? If your store is processing X amount of orders every day, and you suddenly see a drop in like 50%, right? There's something wrong. There's an issue. So this detection mechanism is part of the process. And then there's part of the process to put in what is solution. Wow, solution, I can automate creating a ticket, putting the root cause of where the problem is detected, and somebody gets dispatched. Or you can run a bunch of automated health check to tell you even where the problem is, or if you have a problem that is happened before that you have an automated recovery for, you can orchestrate that automatically and say, hey, I detect this problem, I opening a ticket, I'm deploying this automation, and then this automation can report its status, whether it fixed it or not. If it doesn't fix it, then somebody needs to get involved in it. So this whole thing here can involve not only people, machines, programs, right? Even multiple parties across borders of companies and organizations, from vendors to suppliers to partners, business partners. It's fairly complex when you break it down. Most business processes are complex.
Yeah.
and to understand it and to put together something to detect it, to notify, to remediate, and also to report on success rate, right? Because the CIO is going to get a CFO that like, hey, we're not putting his orders, we're not meeting our numbers. That's financial incentive for what I see the SOAP platform for. It's not something where some guy programmer guy just sitting there and go, hey, I got a genius idea, let's get this solution to do something. No, it's come from a financial impact.
Right. Right. So yeah, so I can totally see that. I mean, for example, it could be inventory issues, it could be order fulfillment issues,
Mm-hmm.
it could
Mm-hmm.
be maybe even financial system issues, anything that touches customers and money, which is at the end of the day, everything is money. And I think what kind of stood out from what you said was, when you're looking at processes, if processes break down or processes are slow, et cetera, that definitely does not sound like something where it's like, okay, I'm going to fix this one particular piece of technology or the server or the software. This looks like as though it's something where you have to kind of orchestrate, a complete solution
Mm-hmm.
process.
Yeah, and the beauty if you do an emerges patient to another side or customer facing or back-end facing, when enough use cases percolate up and you have something to be able to solve it with,
Yeah.
then you start creating what we call kind of a service catalog of things that can be done. It's just like in the beginning when there are ITSM solution out there for help desk, they just did very basic thing. They're like, oh, help desk ticket to onboard a user, help desk ticket to create a user account, help desk ticket to procure a laptop for a new employee. These are little things, but eventually what they do is evolve into a huge service catalog where you pretty much become self-service, right? So the IT department needs tools to help it to self-service. Without that, that's really hard to do.
Sorry, I was wondering if we could look at the different SOAP providers out there and
Mm-hmm.
then pair IT-Conductor with them, and kind of like, if you can kind of like go over maybe two or three or however many of the competitors that are out there, and where IT-Conductor fits into the market in terms of breadth and depth of solution.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Lynn, sometimes the volume cuts like goes really low, and sometimes it comes in nice and full. I don't know if there's something to do with your microphone or something.
Maybe it's my headset. But that's yeah. If it happens.
Yeah. Right now, it's actually pretty low. Let me see. I think I can turn up the volume on my end. Go ahead and say something.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, it's pretty low. It's lower than it was before.
Okay. Let me adjust one more thing.
And there it sounds loud. Okay, so whatever you did just now made it louder.
Interesting. Let me see if I can change device mid-flight.
Okay.
Speaker mic. Okay, let me change to my mic. You can mute. Okay. Well, I guess what's why All right, so let's try this now. I'm gonna switch it all the way up. How about
Yeah, it's now it's pretty low.
weird?
You know what we can do? I can stop. We can actually get off the call and we can go right back into the studio.
Okay. Okay.
And that way you can change microphones, because I think it doesn't allow you to change microphones while you're.
Right. It doesn't change. All right, so let's do that.
Yeah, let's come back into the platform in just a second. Bye bye.
Okay. Okay.
All right, Lynn. So what I wanted to do was to get your perspective on the competitive marketplace, within the service orchestration and automation platform
Mhm.
category, and where does IT-Conductor fit in, and who are some of the main competitors out there?
Yeah. So there are very kind of seeded long time companies, vendors out there that have kind of tried to reinvent their tools to address the SOAP dilemma, if you will. So the Gartner has a magic quadrant they published fairly recently within the last couple of years. And there are companies that are traditionally not, because it's almost like a new category, right? So
Yeah.
but there are companies that do, for instance, job scheduling companies. They are typically so-called automation companies. All they do is schedule, enterprise jobs to run on different applications. And they say, now we are SOAP category in orchestration. So really what they're doing is they're taking some solutions that traditionally just solve one problem. job scheduling, and they are saying, okay, now we are a SOAP vendor for enterprise job scheduling. Okay, so that kind of like, okay, well, that ticks one box, but how do they handle the monitoring piece, the data telemetry piece? So in those cases, you'd have, okay, well, they may be a big company, they may bought another company, or maybe they go out to buy a company that does monitoring or observability, and they say, now we're a SOAP vendor because we have this, right?
Yeah.
And so they will do some kind of interoperability integration, but it's still two separate products. And so what we do see out there are some big players. The BMC is one of those companies. They've always had like the job scheduling products, right? Control M and various other things, and they always had some monitoring products.
Right.
And so because you have a set of tools, right? Let's call that. If you have a set of tools, you can say, oh, if I bundle all these, I'm a big SOAP player. And that's what is happening in industry. If rarely what you're seeing, there's other companies like also a little bit more in they all deal with enterprise computing. So SAP is one of those. But the companies like Redwood company also is, again, job scheduling. They call it an automation company. Redwood has some, plugins for, let's say, SAP type workload.
Right.
So those guys would say, yeah, now we are like, a SOAP company. And then on the other spectrum, you have companies that are traditionally observability only. You have some big guys like Datadog, for instance, and Datadog is a big observability platform. Everybody kind of like, yeah, I know, but then they're not really automating their detection, right?
Yeah.
And so they try to enter the SOAP market by going acquire an automation company.
Right.
So what's happening in the industry is like a lot of companies are out there fishing for products to complement their existing product in order to call themselves SOAP.
Right.
Right. And so it's interesting because we actually build from the ground up to actually do all this. And so naturally, probably before the term is there, we're already doing this
Right.
solution where you go from observability into automation, into orchestration, and you provide that one single point of entry. And the way we approach it, if you build it as a single platform, what it gives you ability to do is that it's tightly integrated. And secondly, because we deal from day one to be, as I gave in the first session, we talked about the difference with IT-Conductor compared to these other players in the market is that we take the data connectivity approach, right? You're constantly connected to the customer. Data is king. If you have data, you can do analytics, you can make decision making, you can even build like now with AI agents, right? AI depends on data and models and how it relates to different tasks. So if you have a single source, a single database, single source of all this information, you can leverage it for different use case easily, as opposed to, let's just say, buying 2, 3, or 4 tools. Either customer buy or these vendors are buying different companies and trying to integrate and say, well, now I have a SOAP platform. But actually, truly, what it is just trying to glue together a bunch of disparate systems.
Yeah.
And everybody who knows integration knows that's not an easy way to deal with it. But if you put a lot of money and time into it, maybe you can make it work. But I feel like in the industry today, it's very low penetration. Some of these vendors have, of course, a lot of customers from their traditional tool. So they're using that to like upsell. Okay, we're like SOAP, blah, blah, blah. We are leading industry. But in actual fact, it's multiple things. So once you start signing the contract they deploy, there may be 3 or 4 tools involved that trying to bring on board, right, to do this job.
Right.
So it's important to realize that not everything, even though we say a Gartner, but not everything a Gartner publish is actually a true market leader from the innovation of a platform standpoint. They do have in the quadrants, hey, upcoming players, blah, blah, blah. And then they say leading industry players. But those leading guys are using the copy, paste, integrate type approach.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. And so it's really pretty clear that IT-Conductor was kind of built from the ground up to be what is now called, a service-oriented automation platform, whereas all the other ones are kind of more of a patchwork quilt. They're all trying to put it together. They were mostly, job scheduling,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they've acquired companies. And so they're kind of like, they're building a Frankenstein monster, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But IT-Conductor is very,
Mm-hmm.
so what is if you were to think about the most common scenario, or I would say the most acute pain that a company has, what's the most low-hanging fruit, I guess, of a scenario that a company is experiencing where they say, where basically a SOAP solution would solve that problem ASAP, and it would save them a lot of money? Because I know there's several, there's many different possible scenarios, but what is the most common and most, I guess, painful problem? And from what kind of company, what kind of vertical would you say is experiencing this most acute pain that a SOAP solution would be a good solution?
Yeah. My interesting question for this pose is actually, instead of a single company where they might have a unique problem, or maybe a problem's not unique, but it's a single company in some vertical. I, on the other hand, think that it's actually much more impactful to look from perspective of managed service provider, as I talked before, the system integrator, managed service provider. So what the difference is? So today, if you implement an IT solution, you enterprise might probably go to, put out an RFP, and you get a bunch of system integrators
Right.
to come and propose. It's a consulting engagement to implement something, right? And that implement something might then transition to what we call managed service provider. After you're done implementing, the customer's like, I don't want to really maintain all this. I want to hire you guys and basically outsource the maintaining the daily life operations of it into the MSP. So now you go transition from an SI to an MSP, and the large player typically do both, right? They may have opportunity to create an implementation and transition to their own managed service provider. And what that does now is that you created, the team has implemented and went off with a little bit of hand holding, and then managed services come in and they do the day-to-day operations. Well, I see that these guys that repeat this model for many customers create technical debt, because they do mainly from a human perspective, right? Think about consulting firm. They use people to implement subject matter, and then they hand over to managed services, which is mostly people. I have 3 shifts in 3 time zones, and they manage operation. So I see the problem exists a lot, that they do this model. The customer assumes that these guys have the tooling, which is not always the case, right? So when I tell daily thing, if I come in daily and I'm a customer's IT manager, and I expect on my arrival that I have a health report of how well my services are being delivered to my business end users. I want to know X number of automation that is running for the past 24 hours to solve people's real requests and problems. And I want to know, let's say, how many of these were auto remediated. I want to know the number of tickets that are still pending that require some kind of attention from a service. And these be done with some automation, semi-automation, all automation. This doesn't exist today.
Yeah.
A lot of them. And that's where the pain point comes in, is managed service providers see this across all the accounts, yet they're not creating a solution based on a platform approach. They are creating a service based on people, a bunch of spreadsheets, some manual things, a bunch of tools that are not very flowing across multiple problem cases. And they're using this as their delivery mechanism. And I think that is actually, to me, when you say a problem, that's actually a problem, because
sounds like a huge problem.
You again, when you buy a phone, you walk into an AT&T or Verizon or whatever, Sprint, you get into this scenario where you expect them to have all the tools to deliver you the service of the phone and the calling or the data solution. You're not going to an Apple, you're not going to a Samsung and asking them to deliver you service. It's the managed service provider, the store front, that have to deliver that service to you. When you have a problem calling, you talk to your AT&T, you talk to, you're not going to call Apple.
Yeah, exactly.
I see this model where the problem is that the service organization need to adopt SOAP approach.
Yeah.
because from that, they can offer their service catalog to all of their customers to prevent the piling up of issues and become technical debt. Because everything that you create for one point solution becomes a technical debt, and that technical debt has to pay sooner or later. You have to pay it. You can kick the tire down the line.
Yeah.
The longer you postpone it, it builds up and it comes up until it explodes as a big issue.
Yeah.
So I see these kind of problems are not like I'd say specifically to one industry or another, meaning like if I could talk about retail or fashion or high tech or, pharma or, pet industry, something like that. These problems exist in the IT industry as a whole. When you engage in a company delivering you the service as a combination of multiple things, it's typical people, process, and platform. If you focus more heavily on the people, right, a little process, but you're not doing the platform, it's a three-legged stool.
Yeah.
Eventually, you become unstable, or you lean more to one or the other, and that one breaks, and then you have a problem. So I see the platform side needs to be equal weighted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And in fact, probably even needs to be emphasized even more.
Yeah, with the new generation of computing, you think about it. Fast forward, you got AI, you got quantum computing, you got cloud computing. All of this means that there'll be less people. There will have to be more platform
Yeah.
to automate, right? And then the process has to get more efficient, because if you automate a bad process, you're just going to make it, fail faster, and make it worse. So there's a heavy lean on platform to solve both the people and the process problem.
And so if you look at these large managed services providers out there, the one that comes into mind is Cognizant one of those? Or
They actually do appear that they acquired some tools. So I don't remember when it was, but recent, within probably like say 3-6 months. All these guys that are out there traditionally as service provider have gone and tried to acquire some tools to make themselves a player, but you're not seeing that as a commercial solution. What they're doing, they're implementing it for internal customers, but not providing as a commercial solution. What I mean a commercial solution is this. Like IT-Conductor, we do a commercial solution. Customer can engage it. Managed service provider, system integrator can do it with the tool where you can put a stamp on powered by IT-Conductor. Whereas if you're talking to a Cognizant, because you brought it up, or could be any of these guys, HCL or whatever, they have consulting practices, they have managed services, and then they try to bolt on this platform side, but it's internal use only, right? So why is that different? The difference there is that the customer themselves ultimately should be the deciding on the tool. So that means if I'm not happy with a managed service provider and I change them, I shouldn't have to swap out the tool.
Yeah.
But if you're using dependent on that particular managed service provider to provide you something that only they not commercially provide this tool, it's only because they engage in it, right? Then you are somewhat locked in. So we believe in the kind of federated where customers has final choice. While there is system integrator, managed service provider using the tool to deliver service, the customer has the right to change these providers and still retain the tool because it's commercial, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I guess the last question I had is how can a managed services provider benefit from the use of a tool like IT-Conductor in terms of enhanced profitability, service delivery, time frames?
Yeah, I go back to finance. So there are penalties. All of these guys have service levels they need to uphold with customers. So if you miss delivery goals month end or however they review them, there are potential financial penalties for missing them. So that's first thing, right? Motivation. If you're responsible and you're not taking care of due diligence by providing the right level of service because you lack the platform or the tool, you could miss the service level and you could get penalized for it. Right. So that's number one. Number two, there is a reputational damage. Okay, so if you're not doing something and there's like a big article that comes out, botched deployment, botched management by somebody, system went down for 30 hours because of right? There is a penalty, plus there is a damaged reputation as part of that, right? And then if you analyze and they say, well, that could have been solved if we had this, blah, 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 and early detection, all these other things. So that's another thing that I see why they would be incentivized to leverage a best practice type SOAP platform is to enhance their service delivery at the same time protecting financial parts of the contract. And then the third is obviously reputation. You want to if you have 5 of these to compete, and 5 of these guys come in and say, yeah, I'm going to do it for this price. I'm going to do this. And the customer has 5 that looks almost the same. And one of them says, well, we use automation and orchestration as part of our core delivery. It's a competitive advantage. Nobody wants to hire a bunch of guys to do manual stuff, right? But you want to hire a bunch of guys that do digital transformation of my process into an automation playbook, run book, catalog service. And then at the end of the day, I'd say, hey, I'm confident I'm doing smart. If I'm not doing smart IT, what's the alternative? I'm doing dumb IT by throwing people and solving problems again and again for the same problem. So I think every CIO is responsible for his COO or CFO or CEO to deliver smart IT solutions to meet the business evolving need, but do in a way where it's budget conscious, but at the same time it's intelligent. So if you can provide an intelligent solution efficiently, then that's the playbook, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we have this thing where IT-Conductor can deliver use case. We're not charging you for platform, but it's how much you consume. I bring my use case that shows value, customers willing to pay for it, and they basically pay for what they consume. I'm not buying a platform, I'm buying solutions. So as more solution you sell for me, it's X number of dollars per solution, etc., which has to prove value all the time. The day it becomes not valuable because it's not solving it anymore, they can stop that solution.
Yeah.
So it's very focused on customer satisfaction at the solution level.
Yeah. That's I love that sort of like pay as you go approach, which is really, it's like a pay per performance thing, or it's like performance based.
Yeah, it's easily justified. You do an ROI based on how many man hours of people you need to hire, train, and have all that overhead to manage as an organization. It used to be companies always boast, all these service company, we have 100,000, blah, 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 consulting firm, It's not that smart.
Yeah.
I should say I got 10,000, but I'm doing the same job as you because I have intelligent automation and, AI and AI ops and all these capability roll into SOAP and all that, right? That's a better solution. It's more scalable and it's a smarter way to maintain the service without having to just linearly add headcount. And we know headcount is a revolving door, especially when today in service industry, you leverage a global service workforce and you can move your engineers from one location to another just because they're cheaper, right? So you can expect a revolving door, but what the customer can expect is if you put in intelligent automation, is the revolving door is not a problem because the knowledge is retained in the IT generated digital workflow.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's actually pretty revolutionary in my opinion. It sounds really groundbreaking. I think that more companies need to be considering this in order to keep their intellectual property or to keep their their knowledge base, and also to have smart IT as opposed to dumb IT. Well, this is great. I think this is a great session. Thank you so much for your time in this interview, and we will see everybody in a next episode of this interview series with Linh Nguyen, who is the CEO and co-founder of IT-Conductor. See you next time.
Thank you, Fernando.